Hey, welcome to our YouTube channel. And next week we have our annual Halloween party. We're super excited to have that happen. So make sure that you are there. Bring an awesome costume. We're gonna have costume contests, lots of prizes, lots of candy, and of course, a really big prize that'll be revealed on that night. So be there, bring some friends. It is gonna be a great time and we would love to see you there. So without any further ado, let's check out this one new series, one message over trending. Here's a little fun fact for you. Do you know almost an hour a day we spend arguing? So research shows that we actually have an average around 6 arguments a day with our family members alone. So that's not even including our friends, our boyfriend or girlfriend, or people on our social media platforms. So then if we have 6 arguments a day, that's 42 arguments a week, or 180 times a month, making it almost over 2,000 arguments that we have in an entire year. So if you find yourself anything like me, and you are arguing with people, or listening to people argue, or getting caught in the middle of argument you don't want to be in, I find myself in that position a lot, and maybe you do as well. So like people, they argue about sports, politics, family stuff, friendship drama, or what person is better at playing the instrument they love, or what famous celebrity is better, or all these dumb things that people argue about, and you feel like you spend a ton of your conversation of just arguing. So seriously, just take a moment, stop and think what the last argument was that you had with someone. Maybe it was right before you came in here. Maybe it was a week ago, just the other day, this morning. It could have been any time, but regardless, you can think of an argument that just happened. It doesn't have to be months ago. It could be just the other day. And I know in my life, and I still have arguments as an adult, and I had arguments happening around me that I instigated, or things that I got caught in the middle of in middle school. So let me tell you a story. In middle school, I had 2 friends, and we had this friend triangle. And it was fine, but because there was 3, there was always one that got left out. And that's okay, it's not a big deal in the scheme of things in my life, but because of that, I always kind of was the one that tried to make so that I wasn't the one that was left out. So I didn't care if I hung out just with this person or the other person in my friend triangle, but I wanted to make sure. So there were 2 friends, and they got into an argument, and they weren't talking to each other, and I got caught in the middle of it, and I did not enjoy being caught in the middle of this argument. And the argument, honestly, I don't even fully remember what it was, but let me tell you, it was not worth anything to be arguing about. The reason I'm telling you this is because arguments, they happen all around us. They happen a lot with all different kinds of people, all over different kind of things. And honestly, it will probably be the best way, or it probably will be this way for the rest of our lives. We're going to have arguments that happen around us or that we are a part of. Arguments are everywhere we look. And I think most of us probably feel like arguments are always bad. I mean, conflict usually doesn't make us feel very good, and they can be really difficult and uncomfortable to have. In fact, I think most of us avoid arguments at all costs. We may have strong opinions about things, but we don't argue them because we want to fit in and not stand out. We don't want to offend anyone or make someone upset. But here's the thing, not all arguments are bad. Arguing can actually be good. if it's done in a healthy and respectful way. And that's why I think arguing is something that we should talk about, because it's going to happen. And if we don't know how to do it well, it's always going to cause damage and not be helpful to either party. So you see, conflict is a part of life, and that's because relationships are a part of life. Whether it's a friend, boyfriend or girlfriend, classmate, parent, sibling, coach, director, someone in your small group, a leader, whoever it may be, you're going to have arguments. And that can be challenging for a lot of reasons. So for starters, feelings are usually involved when we argue. We don't usually argue about something that doesn't matter or something that we don't care about. Think about when you fight with your parents over your grades, it's because your parents care about your grades that you get. Or when you fight with your best friend about the lie they told you, you argue with them because it hurt your feelings that they would lie to you. It's because we care about the things that we choose to argue with. We argue simply because we care a lot about what we're arguing about. Or we care about who we're arguing with. So you don't see your friend make a bad choice. Or you don't want to see your friend make a bad choice. You don't want your girlfriend to break up with you. You don't want your older sibling to talk to you that way. So you argue. Not because you want to, but because you care that much about the other person. In those cases, your feelings are even a bigger deal, because as often it happens in arguments, our feelings get hurt. Someone says something harsh or rude or deeply hurtful in the heat of the argument, and those things are hard to come back from. So what do? Well, sometimes we avoid the person altogether. We don't talk to them, we ghost them, we completely disappear. And we hope eventually that the hurt feelings or the reasons why we were arguing in the first place will just kind of disappear. Or maybe we don't talk about it, or maybe we do talk about it, but we don't talk about it to them. Instead of talking to the person we're arguing with, we talk to everyone else about that thing. But that really can't get us anywhere closer to solving the issue. And I think one of the biggest reasons arguments can be challenging to navigate is because the other person thinks differently than we do. Maybe you fought with a friend who thought using certain words were okay, but you 100% believe that those words are never okay. Or maybe you fought with a teammate because they had totally different strategy on how to win. Or maybe you've seen people argue in the comments section of Instagram over something that totally has the opposite views than the other. Regardless of who is arguing, usually this is what happens. Instead of listening to what someone else has to say, or talking to them calmly about their viewpoint, or even just ignoring it altogether, we jump right into an argument because we can't understand how someone would have a different viewpoint than our own. So what do? We spend our energy trying to convince them that we are right. After all, isn't that the whole point of arguing? To prove your point? To get to the other person to come to your side, to win, to be right? See, I think the biggest problem we have when it comes to the way we navigate our arguments is that we feel like we have to be the winner and the other person has to be the loser. But I don't know about you, but I definitely don't like to lose. The mindset a lot of us have when it comes to argument, we want to win and we want to be right. And it doesn't matter what we have to say or do to make sure at the end of the argument that we're going to come on top. But what if that's the problem that is holding us back? What if arguing to win isn't going to let us win at all? What if trying to be right is actually wrong? Remember what we said, conflict, it happens. No matter how hard we try to make it never happen in our life, conflict is going to happen around us and in our life personally. And because that's the case, I think it's important for us to learn a better way to handle those conflicts and arguing. A way that allows us to aim for more than just being right. Today we're going to look at a verse in the New Testament written by Jesus' half-brother James. And James, he wrote a letter to a group of Christians in the early church after Jesus ascended back into heaven. And this is an absolute game changer to how we argue. So check this out in James 1:19. My dear brothers and sisters, take note of this. Everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry. So notice the word that James uses right before saying what to do. Everyone. So basically, James comes out of the gate saying, everyone. It doesn't matter if you agree with me or not, everyone. It doesn't matter if you like me or not, everyone needs to hear this. It's not for the people I agree with. It's not just for the people who think they're right. It's because, and it's for everyone. That's for all of us. Now, because James wrote this letter to people who are following Jesus, I think the instruction is even more powerful. The message is for everyone, but it's especially important for those who believe in Jesus. As followers of Jesus, this is how we're supposed to communicate to other people. This is how we're supposed to argue. So, what did James tell us to do? Let's go through it. First, he said to be quick to listen. In other words, when you find yourself in an argument, listen first. Do your best to hold off from speaking until you've actually made an effort to listen. And when they're talking, don't think about what you're going to respond with of how to win the argument, but truly just listen to their viewpoint and the reasons why they hold to it. I think just applying this first piece of wisdom to the way we argue could radically change the outcomes of our arguments. And then James followed by telling us to be slow to speak. So we listened really well. We listened to their viewpoint. Instead of coming right off the gate and sharing why they're wrong, let's just be slow to speak. Now, for some of us, this one is particularly difficult. We want to speak what's on our mind all the times, but especially in an argument, we want to share the reasons why we are right. But remember, slow to speak doesn't mean not to speak. It doesn't mean that we have to just sit back and take it and be passive. James wasn't asking us to not to defend ourselves or our viewpoints. Instead, he was asking us to pause before we do, to stop before we talk, to think before we speak. Sometimes in my life, I haven't been slow to speak, and those were the times that I said hurtful things that I did not think through. So when we were slow or we were quick to listen, and now we need to take a moment and pause and be slow to speak and choose carefully the words that we're going to use. And if James was writing this letter today, I think he would also include be slow to text, be slow to post, be slow to comment, be slow to talk to behind someone's back. Whatever the response may be for you, pause and think about it before you actually do it. And all this adds up to the final thing that James wrote, be slow to become angry. And this is a total shift in the way we approach arguments. After all, aren't we using arguing because we're angry? We're angry that they don't believe what we believe. And James wasn't asking us to not be angry. He wasn't asking us to ignore our feelings, but he was asking us to lead the argument with another feeling. A stronger feeling, love. Choosing to become slow to anger is choosing love when we want to hate. It means that focusing on the person, not the point they're trying to make. It means valuing the relationship more than being right. In other words, when we argue, I think we need to remember this. Care more about the person you're arguing with than the point you're trying to make. So arguing, it happens. It's a part of life, but how it turns out deeply depends on how the way we choose to handle it. So the next time you find yourself in a position to argue, what would it look like for you to care about the person that you're arguing with more than the point you're trying to make? What would it look like for you to try some of what James was trying to talk about here. To be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry. And if you do this, I think you will find out that the way you argue and the way you feel about arguing is going to deeply change for the better. And I know this isn't easy, so let's try to think of a few things this week that we can do. So number one, let's memorize this verse. Really commit James 1:19 to memory, and trust me, it's that important that we should memorize it. You want to have this in your brain deeply connected to the way that you approach arguing. And when you memorize it, you'll think of this verse before you start to speak in an argument. And two, apply it to someone. Think about the person in your world who needs you to actually follow James' instruction when it comes to arguing. Who do you find yourself tempted to just hate and be angry with about their viewpoints? Who is the person that argues with you all the time, and it's time for you to care more about them than the argument itself? That way, when you think of this person, you'll also think of James' words on how you can better approach them. And then put yourself in their shoes. Now, this one is tough, but I want to challenge you to see more in that person than just your differences, the argument that you're trying to make, or the stance that you have. I want you to try and see and understand their side. Even if you still think it's wrong, try to see what they're trying to say. This is part of being quick to listen instead of being quick to speak. And Jesus could have won every argument that he ever had, but he still talked to people and he still listened to what they had to say. And when he was able to listen and hear what they had to say, he then was slow to speak and was never angry enough to let his anger be the reason of his argument. He loved everyone that he was arguing with, and his deep love for them was the way that his arguments were always powerful and deeply different than most of our arguments that we have with each other. It doesn't mean that you'll always agree with what they think that the person you're arguing with, but it does mean that you'll try to understand why they think that, and it means you'll try to understand them. Remember, care more about the person you're arguing with than the point you're trying to make. If that's the only thing you take away, to care more about the person than the argument, your life is going to be it'll look so much different because you care more about the person, not about the argument itself.